What are you taking a look at, Krystal?
Well, guys, residents of East Palestine, Ohio are now being told they better stick to bottled water for the foreseeable future as a toxic soup of chemicals makes its way through that community's waterways and disperses throughout the broader Ohio River Valley. The derailment of a train packed full of hazardous chemicals has been a horrifying disaster for the local community, and it's been a lesson in the monstrosity of corporate greed combined with industry-friendly politicians and regulators, or in any case, it should have been a lesson in this political toxic sludge, but unfortunately, corporate media nearly across the board has failed to give Americans any context for how the hell this nightmare situation came to pass in the first place. Norfolk Southern and their industry allies have perpetrated a grave crime that could impact this part of Ohio for generations, and the corporate news media have served as accomplices in the cover-up. According to a comprehensive analysis from Media Matters, only 3% of broadcast coverage mentioned the years-long successful industry campaign to weaken rail regulations. And if you don't understand the way that corruption fueled this disaster, you really don't understand this story at all. It is just a tragic, inevitable act of God with no one to blame and no action to be taken. And that is precisely the way that industry wants you to view this derailment. As our friends at The Lever reported, 3 different administrations failed to regulate the rail industry in ways that very specifically contributed to the devastation of this crash. The Obama administration exempted trains carrying exactly the sort of chemicals that were on this train from being classified as a high-hazard flammable train, designation that would have subjected them to more stringent safety regulations. After seeing this train turn into a giant fireball and official warnings that if not for the controlled release, it could have literally detonated like a bomb, blowing up the entire town, imagine the levels of corruption that would lead to such materials failing to be designated as high hazard and as flammable. The Trump administration, though, they went even further. They rolled back Obama-era safety regs, which would have required modern braking systems to be rolled out industry-wide. Now, this particular train relied on a braking system literally invented in the 1800s. And as a result, experts say the devastation of the crash was much more profound, with more cars derailed, more toxic chemicals spilled. And the Biden administration, with Pete as absentee figurehead at the top of the Department of Transportation, just let the new corporate status quo reign. Civil War-era brakes, unregulated toxic chemicals, and all. But they did add their own special little touch by effectively backing industry's approach to screwing and stressing and stripping their workforce down to the bare bones, all in the name of cost cutting so they could give their executives bonuses and their shareholders a multi-billion-dollar giveaway. 3 administrations, Obama, Trump, Biden. Both parties, Democrats and Republicans, they all birthed this whore. Anyone pretending that it's only one party or one person to blame for these years of failures and industry bootlicking is a liar and a hack, running cover for their team. Anyone pretending like this was a fluke accident which couldn't have possibly been prevented is also a liar and a hack, running cover for industry. And to look at the news media's coverage is to see an entire universe of liars and hacks with hardly a single exception. Now, the media failures to reveal the real story, they were profound and they were really across the board. None of the Sunday shows covered the train derailment at all, not one. An American town was literally poisoned by corporate greed. They couldn't bother to make mention of it. During a key 3-day stretch from February 10th to February 12th, there was not a single mention of this derailment in national news. Not one. But the specific strategies that were deployed by each of the 3 cable news networks really exposes the nature and the purpose of the cover-up. According to that report, quote, on cable, national networks CNN, Fox News Channel, and MSNBC, they aired just over 2.5 hours of coverage on the train derailment. The majority of reporting was done by CNN, which dedicated over an hour of coverage across 42 segments. It was followed by Fox News, which aired 50 minutes across 22 segments. MSNBC spent 36 minutes across 19 segments reporting on the derailment and toxic fire that followed. Let's break all of this down. In every instance, you can see how the network's biases and political orientations drove their coverage. CNN did the most coverage of the 3 networks thanks to their if it bleeds, it leads orientation. But while they cover the derailment because it's a sensational news event, not a single segment actually looked at the bipartisan political corruption that led to the catastrophe. Not one. Sensationalism with zero accountability. The CNN way. Over at MSNBC, they decided the best way to run cover for the failed response of the Democratic administration was just to mostly not talk about the derailment at all. Over a 10-day period, they devoted a mere 36 minutes to the catastrophe. To put that in context, this is a 24-hour news network. That means they had 14,400 minutes of airtime to fill over that time period, and they chose to devote only 36 to the derailment. Now, Fox, they did slightly more coverage, clocking in at 50 minutes throughout the 10-day period. But now they're leaning in after Pete handed them an absolute gift by talking about white construction crews and ignoring the derailment. With this blessing from the culture war gods, Fox has now decided to cover the story, laying into the Biden administration while of course conveniently ignoring the fact that Trump failures were some of the most critical in setting the stage for the current catastrophe. New Ohio Senator J.D. Vance went on Tucker Tuesday night. Take a listen.
Well, Tucker, we've had hundreds of train derailments after we spent over $1 trillion on infrastructure in this country. So the fact that this isn't getting obviously better is a major indictment of the people spending the money and what they're spending the money on. Now, we know if you listen to Secretary Buttigieg today, that they are focused more on whether we have too many white men in construction jobs than he is on the fundamentals of his job, which is ensuring we have a viable transportation infrastructure in this country. And unfortunately, my constituents in East Palestine have been some of the main victims of the fact that we have failing infrastructure in our country, again, after spending tons of money in an effort to actually fix it. So the problem we have, Tucker, is that we are ruled by unserious people who are worried about fake problems instead of the real fact that our country is falling apart in some of the most important ways. You mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency. Of course, it says it right there. It should be focused on clean air, clean water. It's the thing that I'm most focused on for the people of East Palestine, but so often they're focused on environmental racism and other ridiculous things instead of fixing the problem that they are established to fix.
So listen, zero disagreement from me on the unseriousness of Mayor Pete and Biden and all the rest. But listen, J.D. Vance, you are the senator for the state. You couldn't be bothered to put out a statement until 9 days after the fact. You didn't care about this one lick until you could come up with a partisan culture war angle, so spare me your belated faux concern and outrage. Second of all, the problem here isn't from your list of right-wing culture war buzzwords, environmental racism or wokeism as another Fox host claimed, or war on white people as Charlie Kirk claimed. It's corruption and it's corporate greed, plain and simple. It's a system that puts profit over people and doesn't give a shit about working people, whether they're black, white, purple, or blue. And in this instance, very specifically as documented by The Lever, it's a story about a bunch of politicians on both sides of the aisle who would rather lick industry's boots than protect places like East Palestine. But you don't want to tell that story because it implicates the guy you owe your whole political career to. That would be Donald Trump. And you don't want to talk about that corruption because it leads straight back to your own party. You want to know why the media is covering up for industry on this story? It is the same reason they do it all the time. Because it doesn't fit their dumb, partisan, black and white narratives. MSNBC doesn't want to talk about it because it looks bad for their team. Fox doesn't want to be honest about it because that would look bad for their team. Instead, they invent some culture war drivel that in the absence of another accurate story is going to wholly fill the void. I lived 15 miles south of East Palestine for years, actually in the exact same county, Columbiana County. The toxic sludge that's now drained into the Ohio River, that is flowing right through East Liverpool, where I used to live when I gave birth to my first child. The core of my politics today were developed while I lived there. There are few places in America which have been more betrayed by both parties than this region. Steel mills shuttered, factory work sent overseas. In East Liverpool, the town budget was so stretched that the mayor used to use his own money and sweat labor to paint the municipal pool every year so that local kids could at least have a place to go in the summer. And no surprise, this despair and abandonment has also made it the epicenter of the opioid crisis. Now, the news media did not tell this story because it didn't fit into their little partisan bubbles. They didn't expose who was making money off of that destruction, the lives that had been decimated. They treated it just like they did this train derailment as an inevitable act of God. Who could help it? Thank God for truly independent media because we all know damn well the way that we have been lied to. And this story has made me really mad on a variety of levels. The total dishonesty across the board. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Soccer and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.